20 episodes. I want to start there, not with a watch story or a brand story or a philosophical framework, just 20 episodes. When I recorded episode one, I honestly didn't know if I would make it to episode five. Not because I didn't believe in the project, I did, and I do, but because making something is hard. Showing up every week and trying to say something worth hearing is hard. And this watch hobby is enormous, and there are some big personalities in this space. And the things that I don't know about it are even more enormous. And the ways that this could go wrong, the facts that I could get wrong, which I'm sure I have, and the pronunciations that I could butcher, which I have. Thank you, Chopek, for messaging me directly and telling me that you guys were laughing in a room at my French. I appreciate you, brothers and sisters. There's a lot of facts that I could have gotten wrong, which I'm sure I have, and takes that I could have misjudged, and voices that I may not have represented fairly. And all of this was present when I sat down for the very first episode. So 20 episodes later, I want to say something to the people who have been here for this. Thank you. And not in like a generic way, in a very specific, this actually means something to me way. You didn't have to listen. There's a lot of watch podcasts. There's a lot of places to spend your listening time. The fact that you chose to spend some of it here, episode after episode, through the philosophy and the security lecture, I'm sorry for that. I just had to share it with you so that hopefully you can protect yourselves. And the episode on Journe and getting into Japanese mountain workshops and British clockmakers on an island. That's not something that I take for granted. So before we do anything else, just thank you and just know that I want to talk about what we've actually built, not me.
Hey, what's I ski? Yeah. What's on your wrist? Perpetual calendar, three-hander, stainless. All
right, welcome back to What's on Your Riste. I am Wachowski. I'm actually just Riste for most folks. I use the handle Wachowski online. It's a joke from my last name, which is Simidowski. So I am actually just Riste. This is episode 20, and it's the season one finale. So if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to the entire season, this is not a typical podcast where we go through and hit on the most recent releases of watches. So it's more of like a television show, I would say, or more like a survey. And so start at the very beginning and then work your way up and then get to this point and then join us maybe in season two. Okay. So today's going to have two parts. The first part is really mine. It's this reflection on the season, an honest account of what I think we did well and what I think we or I have left unfinished, and maybe a map of where season two might go. Now, obviously, those things are all up for debate, but this is kind of my sketch of what that looks like. And if you saw the sketch of what I had for season one, it's very, very different than what it actually turned into, which I think is even more beautiful because it was being written as engagement was coming in. Then the second part of the episode is going to belong to you. We're going to start with this kind of the second part with this listener Q&A questions actually that came in over the course of the season that I either hadn't had a chance to answer or that I want to answer properly now. Then when we get into the listener mail, which I think is kind of fun, there's some letters and some stories and some confessions and arguments that have been coming to me since like I started to ask for them about halfway through the season. So like episodes 10, 11, I think, and 13, and then also 18, I believe I referenced those. So I'm going to read some of those, and some of them are pretty extraordinary. And the people who sent them deserve to be heard. Now, with that said, some of the folks that had submitted stuff did ask me to change their name, so I have changed their name. So hopefully you'll know who you are, even though I've changed your name to mask your identity. So segment one, let's talk about what we built and kind of the honest accounting. Let me tell you what this season was as I look back on it from the finish line now. I started as a kind of rabbit hole. Episode one was almost exactly that. Welcome to the rabbit hole. Here's the big names. Here are the independents. Here's why this hobby is deeper than you or I think it is. And it was an invitation. It was my first handshake to you. And then something happened that I didn't fully plan. The show got personal. Episode three, the watches that made me, was the episode that I was honestly the most nervous about recording. Talking about my brother's Gucci G Chrono, for example, talking about the Smiths that I wore when my son was born, the Grand Seiko that I wore when my middle daughter arrived, the Laurier I wore when my youngest came into the world, talking about the 2023 break-in and what it actually felt like to come home to a collection that wasn't there anymore. And I was nervous because it was real. It was things that actually happened to people that I actually love. right? And I took a lot of blame for that. And something that I haven't shared with you is that I take blame for that because the people that came into our home were coming for something that I had. And it violated the safety and security of my home because of my hobby, right? If I wasn't somebody who that at the time was collecting more high end watches, that wouldn't have opened the door for people to want to come into my home and take those things. And so I do still, and I still do take some to take responsibility for that. And there's some guilt as well there. And so I don't take that lightly. Now, that watch, the Gucci G Chrono, it showed up twice in the season, right? It showed up in episode 3, and it was the grief object, my brother's watch, the one that he gave me, the one I wore when I needed him close, and it was the heaviest version of that watch. It was the eudaimonic version. It was the watch that was not a watch at some point, it became a person. And then in episode 5, kind of the fun episode, Mr. Jones, Studio Underdog, Zelos, it came back and kind of my opening. It was the fun watch. It was the murdered out G Chrono, all black, the watch that I used to wear because it was outrageous and it made me smile and I didn't have to take myself too seriously. And honestly, when I wore it, especially around watch people, they kind of looked at it as like, well, this dude doesn't know what he's doing, right? And it was the watch kind of that really was just this kind of reminder to just have a good time. And then again, it was the same watch, but it had two truths to it. And neither one really canceled each other out. They just sort of coexisted in the same space at the same time, like a dual reality. And I realized after writing both of those episodes and sitting with what I had said that the G Chrono is actually the best argument for this season about a hedonia slash eudaimonia framework because it's both. It's the heaviest watch that I had owned at the time. It was also the most fun watch that I owned at the time. And those things were not in conflict with one another. They lived in the same space. They were literally in the same watch. Same scratched up black bezel, the same, dial that my brother had picked out. And that is the watch that can hold, I think, all of that. And I didn't fully understand it until the season gave me the opportunity to verbalize it to you. So I hope that that made sense now as it's coming across now that as I was articulating it and writing it out, the watch itself became something more, even though I don't own it now. And that was the episode I think that changed the show for me because the response told me something that I hadn't been sure of, that there was this personal thread that the why of this hobby seems to matter to actual humans who live in this space. It's not a detour from watch content. And what I realized was that real people listen to this. The bots that we have on Reddit and all of these other social media platforms, the bots don't listen to audio podcasts. There's no incentive for them to go and put comments and hate. It's just real people. And so what I found is that as I've slowly migrated away from a lot of the social media platforms, this space is real people and real engagement. And what I've seen is a lot more engagement from a real personal perspective, not the prototypical stuff that you're going to find on all of these watch spaces where things are being pushed by either massive conglomerates or hate being pushed on one brand or another because, and then you can fill in the blank with whatever bot is a program to say that week, right? And so again, that episode or those episodes really changed the way that I viewed this space and what this podcast could become. It became the center of it, and everything else, like the brands and the movement and the history, they became the vehicle, but the destination seems to now become, this question of why does this object on your wrist mean something to you? And that's where I get to tell the stories. I get to tell the stories from people who are watch owners and designers and people who are fabricators, but then also who are brand owners who have their names on dials. They're not just making watches to sell watches. They're making watches because the objects themselves mean something to them and they want to share it with people. And I feel like that's where my connection is this story that I get to tell, these stories from all these watch brands. I get to tell these stories with you, and that's my way of sharing and kind of growing this space as well. And so once I understood that, I think the season kind of started to build itself. Now, episode 4, the decoy effect framework, and episode 7's kind of security lecture, kind of hard earned and not theoretical. Episode 8 had the Chopek story, which gave me this chance to tell what might be the best hidden story in modern horology. And the man who co-founded Patek Philippe, for example, had this fallout with a business partner and then was forgotten for like 146 years. Episode 9 in Dornbluth, again, the quietest workshop I think I know of in hot horology, and a local educator who, hand makes these presentation boxes one at a time from local wood. Episode 10, obviously, that one, hedonia and eudaimonia, and gave the show kind of a philosophical language that I think we've used in episodes since. And then we get this 4-episode arc, right? We get episodes 10 through 13, Rolex, Renault and Papi, Reshep, the arc that went from like the most recognized watch on earth to the most quietly perfect one. And that arc, the arc asked something. It asked, what is the value of a watch that no one recognizes? And again, that's the value of this podcast, right? What's the value of this podcast that no one's going to know? We are not, I am not someone that has a massive platform. I do not have a, you know, social media presence. I don't have this huge website where I'm trying to sell you something. We're just telling stories here. And so that question, the idea of asking, what is the value of a watch that no one recognizes? And then we work to try to answer that through the story of a boy from Kosovo who arrived in Geneva with nothing and ended up making some of the most extraordinary objects in modern watchmaking. And that arc is the best thing I think this season had produced. At least from my perspective, I was the most proud of it. In episode 19, FP Journe, it felt like the right kind of coda to that. Because Journe trained Reshep, and Journe has his own story, starts kind of, they start in kind of the same place that Reshep does, a young person who was told implicitly they didn't belong in this world. They decided that they belonged anyways, and they spent decades building something to prove that point. So the show went some places, that I didn't expect as well. The Tool Watch episode, for example, 14 was this deliberate exhale after the weight of like the prior couple of episodes, and there was some clarifying stuff that happened as well. Talking about like a $50 G-Shock right after spending an hour on Reshep. That's the range of this hobby. $50 to $1 million is what is the part that makes this whole podcast work. The American watchmaking episode 15, that surprised me too. I had no idea going in the depth of the story of J.N. Shapiro, for example, and I didn't know it was going to hit so hard. A school principal who learned guilloché, built 148 out of 180 components himself, who made the first 100% American watch in like over 50 years. That story has obsession and craft and national identity. It's the gap between what's possible and what's believed to be possible. And truth, as someone who's an American, the story touched me. And I pray, I hope, I pray that the stories that I tell, especially if you're someone who's in a different country and you're hearing the stories of some of these remarkable people in your space that might be just down the street from you, that these inspire you as well to be considering just being appreciative of their work and their craft. And I think that's something that we should be proud of, right? There's this moment where we can be proud of the people who are in our spaces. And again, the Japanese coverage, the Japan episodes of 16 and 17, they set up something that I think is going to be important for the show moving forward. Japan is the most underappreciated watchmaking country in the Western collector conversation. The spring drive is one of the most technically extraordinary movements I think that's ever been put in a wristwatch. It's invented by a man who unfortunately passed away before it reached the market. Crador makes watches that compete with the finest Swiss watches, and they're finishing in this simple two-room studio in the mountains of Nagano. And again, they're not a budget alternative to Switzerland. This is a parallel tradition, I think, that deserves parallel respect. And when we talk about finishing, I specifically did not talk about Grand Seiko polishing and Grand Seiko finishing and the idea of Zaratsu because it's been discussed. And so the space that I have here is to hopefully uncover more and go deeper. In episode 18, British watchmaking, I think, had the emotional thread that I didn't realize it was going to have until I started to write it. And then when I was going through and rehearsing it, the Smith's Everest, for example, the watch that appeared in episode 3, the watch that, was on my wrist when my son was born. And then again, it pops up in 18. It's the section about time factors, right? And the season kind of coming full circle. And that wasn't planned, but it just sort of felt right. And so that is season 1, right? 20 episodes, 5 countries formally covered, a dozen referenced, from G-Shock to FP Journe, from hedonia to eudaimonia, from the watches that make you happy to the watches that make you you. And here's what I think I got right, or I think we got right. We worked, and I say we like I have a mouse in my pocket, but we, as in the collective we, I treated you listeners as adults. We don't apologize for getting complicated. We don't apologize if we didn't dumb things down at times. And we didn't moralize, or at least we didn't try to. When we talked about Rolex, we gave Rolex its genuine respect before we said anything more complicated. When we talk about tool watches, we don't sneer at them like they're the lesser category. When we talk about philosophy, we did it because the philosophy was actually useful and not just because we wanted to sound smart. And I think we kept the personal thread alive. Again, the break-in in 2023, the brother who passed away in 2009, whose thoughts I still carry with me. You know, the births, the watches that mark those passages. The hobby is not about those things, but the hobby holds those things. And the watches are physical memory of that life lived. And I think here's what I want to kind of get to, and I'm putting this on record because it's kind of a promise. We didn't finish my brother's watch story. The Gucci G Chrono appeared twice in the season, grief in episode 3, and then a little bit of joy in episode 5, and both were true, but neither is complete. The full episode, the one that sits kind of with this watch, that's a little bit harder for me to say. It kind of deserves more time. And that's still ahead sometime. I don't know if it'll be in season 2 or sometime as a bonus episode or something, but it's there's more to say about that, and I just have a hard time putting it into, and I'm not ready to give it its full treatment, but I think I will be soon enough. So when I'm there and that episode comes up, I think it'll be one of the more personal things in this podcast will produce. But again, I don't know when that will happen. We didn't get to going on a deep dive of Philippe Dufour, the name that has appeared on this show like more than any other. And the man whose finishing technique, Cradors, Micro Artist Studios, they traveled to Switzerland to learn, and whose watched the simplicity set the standard for modern watchmaking and modern movement finishing, who is, again, by most serious accounts, the greatest living watchmaker. We keep circling him. I keep circling him, but I'm hoping in season 2 I get to land that plane. We also didn't get into a deep dive of specific techniques like guilloché. Jan Shapiro opened the door to that in episode 15, like a rose lathe engine or a rose engine lathe, but the craft is disappearing, unfortunately, and the few people that are left that can do it. And so I think that concept, the idea of finishing techniques, it might deserve more attention. So maybe an episode on just the finishing techniques. I don't know yet. Again, maybe season 2 will deliver that. We didn't get into a listener mail tradition properly yet. So tonight, whenever you're listening to this morning, is going to be the beginning of that. But the community stories, I think, deserve more than just a single episode. And so I'm hoping that I can build a tradition around that. But again, I don't know what that will look like. So maybe in season 2, there will be more of those. I think sometimes podcasters can overdo it with that kind of stuff. And I would much prefer to just have content that you're really excited about as opposed to just me answering emails all the time or messages. And then there is, I think, more. There's more British independence. Like Roger W. Smith deserves more coverage, not just like a little segment. The Japanese indie watchmakers are their own world. Their craft techniques, the Grand Fu enamel, the anglage, the hand bluing, their movement architectures, they deserve like more attention. The watchmakers and their families, these generational stories of like the Dornbluths and the Gronefelds and others like them, they deserve way deeper investigation than I could give them in the small time that I have here. And season 2, I think, is going to hopefully be bigger than season 1 because season 1 has given us the foundation and the language and the framework and the community to go further. And I think what we needed season 1 to be able to drive us into season 2. Now that's the map, and now I'm going to get into I think what the Q&A is going to look like. So let's call this segment 2. Let's get into the listener Q&A. So before we get to the mail, I want to take some time with questions that have been coming across, basically either via email or in direct messages from some of the apps. So I want to take some time with questions that have been coming in, and I've been sitting with some of them because I wanted to give them a real answer versus like the quick, immediate answer. So here's some of those now. Okay, so the first one, question number 1, Riste, do you have a grail watch? Okay, so that's a good question. The honest answer is not in the way that the hobby usually means it. So I'm not like lying awake at night dreaming of a specific reference from a specific manufacturer. I'm not maintaining like a mental waiting list. If that's like a grail, then no, I don't have that. But if you ask me what I've always wanted, what would feel like the thing I've been moving towards, the answer is something that I've never actually seen made. It's something that doesn't exist. Again, you know I own a World War II era Zenith. It's worn, it's honest, it has radium on the dial that I love the look of and no longer really wear for some pretty obvious reasons. I will occasionally wear it. And I've had this idea for years and years of making a watch. Not like a collection of watches, not a brand, something way more intentional than that. Just like a single piece or a very small run, maybe 5, that takes everything from that Zenith as a direct point of inspiration, the proportions, the aesthetic, even the worn aesthetic, the look of it, and the feeling that this object has that it's been somewhere and it's done something. So the dial would be manually distressed, like no artificial aging in the way that the the word sometimes gets used to mean like faked or faux, but like deliberately worked, like by hand, to carry the same, quality that that radium dial had, but in a safer way. And this sense that the time has moved across it and it's left this mark. So it'd be warm, but it would be imperfect in all the right ways. And the watch dial would be honest. The movement, and this is the part that I've thought the most about, would be sourced from something like Voucher or Voutilainen. It would be either a manual wind or a micro rotor, because if you're going to build something like this with like real intention behind it, the movement that has to match the dial saying, I think someone like Kari or the folks at Voucher, I think their movements are by most accounts the finest that you can get, and being able to be connected to like Kari in Finland or even Torsti Laine over in his shop in Switzerland. That would be fantastic. And so, or even just connecting to Voucher and being able to run a micro rotor. I think that would be a serious movement in a watch that was really personal to me. And then the name on the dial, it would be my son's. Not mine. It would be his, because the watch that I wore the day that he was born, that Smith's Everett's, it's made its way into the show, and it tells you something. The idea of making something that carries forward, his name would carry forward, and that he might wear it someday or hold it or maybe hand it to someone that he loves. And that would be the closest thing I guess I have to a grail. So not a specific model or a manufacturer's catalog, something that really doesn't exist, something that I would have to make. But I guess that's the grail. It's not a watch that I can point to. It's a watch that I would have to specifically build. So that if that makes sense. Question 2, you don't really cover the big brands. Tudor, Cartier, Vacheron Constantin, Richard Mille. Any plans to? Possibly. I don't want to be dismissive about any of those names. Like, they're all serious watchmakers in their own right, and they have real stories to tell, each of them. But here's kind of where I land, I guess, on this, honestly. Like, those brands already have ambassadors. They have like departments and social teams, and they have like event budgets, and they have like relationships with like media outlets that audiences, they're many times the size of like this one, obviously. They have no shortage of like platforms that are willing to shine light on what they're doing. And so they are, by like, I guess, any reader's reasonable measure, they're already well covered. So what I've found, and I think the show has slowly been building toward, is that the corners of this market that are genuinely quiet are also often kind of the most extraordinary. So like the workshop with 9 people and a breakfast table, Dornbluth, right? The watchmaker in Kosovo who arrived in Geneva with nothing and made something that the world had never seen. The school principal in America who learned to operate a Rose engine lathe because nobody else was doing it. What about FP Journe and the fact that he wanted a tourbillon but couldn't afford one? The islands, there's craft, and so there's this obsession, and I think a lot of that occurs without any press releases, without any waiting lists that are managed by algorithms, and there's a lot of machinery that I think there's a lot of machinery behind some of these releases that we see from these monster brands. And there's like celebrity endorsements, and there's athletes that are paid to wear them and that kind of stuff. And, this platform is small, and I know that, but I've come to believe that that small is, if it's dedicated and it has a particular kind of usefulness to it. And it can go where the bigger ones can't or won't or choose not to. So this podcast can sit with a story long enough to properly tell it, and it can be a voice for people and projects that don't have one. And that's what I hope the show is. And I think it's hard if I'm being honest, if I'm spending my episodes on the names that have already done something, then I'm wasting time and space, and I'm wasting your attention span on things that you probably already know. Now, again, there are tons of other folks out there on YouTube that you can go, say you purchased a Santos, which is an awesome watch, and you need just affirmation that it's a good watch. You can go to YouTube and they'll give you that affirmation, right? But if you want to know about alternatives or, smaller micro indie brands that might be doing something similar for less than $7 or $8,000, maybe this is more of the space, right? Or maybe you have all of those and you just come here to hear the stories that you've never heard before. And so I guess probably I'm not going to be the big editorial focus ever. I will not be Fratello. That's not my goal. My goal isn't to be anywhere in those spaces. My goal is to be in a completely different space. The world of watchmaking, yes, but, and I don't mean to want to be disrespectful. Those places are amazing. Fratello, Worn and Wound, all of those podcasts are remarkable, and they serve such an amazing section of this community. But my goal is to not be like them. My goal is to be different. And I hope that's why you're listening. So again, I guess it's just me trying to be genuine and the fact that I'm listening to and what I'm most interested about. If I'm being honest and I'm being a little selfish, I'm more fascinated by brands that no one talks about. And so I guess that would be my answer to that question. Probably no major Richard Mille coverage. Question 3. What did you learn the most while making season 1? Oh boy, I have thought about this one for a bit, and I have some notes on this one because I peeked at some of my questions, but here's a big one. So the honest answer is, I guess the skills that I brought to this from like years of academic research, they translate pretty well in some expected ways, and then way worse in others. So doing homework and stuff like research habits, going to primary sources, and then being skeptical of like some received wisdom, those kind of follow this thread, meaning that, when you pull a string on a research or you're trying to gather information, when you pull something, you can kind of get more layers and you start to pull some stuff out. So those have been genuinely useful. And I think the episodes that I'm like most proudest, or the most proudest, the proudest ones are the ones where I dug past the story and really told what was underneath all of it. And so I think that's like the stories of Chapek and Dornbluth and even Jan Shapiro, they came from that kind of that research instinct, I guess. Now, what I did not anticipate is how consistently my technological shortcomings would manage to find me. The audio editing software that I was convinced I understood until, I wasn't. The file formats that disagreed with me in the worst possible moments, the quiet and habitually persistent gap of what I know should the what this show should sound like and how I actually try to make it sound are completely different. They are sometimes incongruent with one another. And when you hear my voice is raspy in some of the episodes, it's because it's the third or fourth time that I've recorded it because audio was lost. And there's this kind of particular kind of humility, I think, that comes from being genuine and competent in one domain and genuinely, my goodness, outmatched in an adjacent one. And I've been collecting that humility one episode at a time for 20 episodes. And I do not claim to know everything about every single brand. What I claim to be is curious about brands that people don't know about. And as a result, I do homework on them and I try to gather as much information as I can. But in some instances, if I'm gathering information on a brand, then there's a second or third layer deep. I'm guessing on how to pronounce a name because I can't find information on how to pronounce their name properly. And I think I'm better at some of this stuff now than I was in episode 1, and I think in some respects I'm worse at some things than I was in episode 1. So I expect to be better still, hopefully by the end of season 2, but again, always growing and learning and just trying to be a genuine person. So I guess that's probably maybe the most honest version of what kind of learning looks like, is that I'm open to suggestions and I'm habitually trying to get better. Okay, I hope that made sense. Question 4. Do you plan on expanding the podcast, social media, paid content, all of that? Short answer, no. No, no, no. I want to say this as, I guess, plainly as possible without dressing it up too much because I think the cleaner I am, the more it's going to mean. I've been fortunate. I didn't grow up fortunate. We had a very bumpy start to my world, but I've made my money doing other things, and that means that this podcast doesn't have to be a business. It gets to be what it is. It's a passion. I make this because I love making it for an audience that I respect. And I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but from someone on this side of the computer and this side of the microphone saying it to you on your speakers, I respect you as an audience. I respect you as an individual. And I respect this subject so much that I can't stop thinking about it. And that's a genuinely rare position to be in. So I don't take it lightly. I stay up late, I wake up early, I do homework on this stuff because I'm passionate about it and I enjoy it and I want to share it with the world. But I specifically want to share it one-on-one with you. And I feel like a podcast is the most beautiful way to do that because essentially it's just you and I. And what that means practically is, yeah, no paid newsletter, no insider content, no tier system where the people who pay more get more access to a version of the show that the rest of the people don't. I want this to be free, completely straightforward, free. As long as I'm able to make it, that's the goal. Now, with some of you, if you're watching it or listening to it on certain platforms, they have ads. Those ads do not pay me. So if you go to like iHeartRadio, which is one of the platforms we're on, and there's an ad that runs at the front end, that is not me. I'm not getting like clicks for that. That's just the platform putting in their own ads beforehand. So maybe switch to another platform. You go to Google or Amazon or YouTube or Spotify or whatever, right? Spotify is where I typically load all of this stuff into first. And so that's usually the one that's uploaded and the most up to date, the fastest. Other ones are pulling RSS feeds from that hub of Spotify. Okay. So free as long as I can make it and make it honestly. So again, I'm going to be honest. I find all right, here I'm gonna get myself in trouble, but I'm gonna do it anyways because I love you. I find a lot of the paid content models in the space genuinely frustrating. Not because the people running them are wrong to do it. I respect them. They're great. If it's someone's livelihood, the calculus is completely different, and I respect that. But when I think paywalls have okay. So because I think paywalls have this way of quietly changing what gets made, when you're accountable to a subscriber base, the pressure to produce consistently, to optimize, to build an audience that converts, that pressure is real and it shapes things in the way that sometimes is invisible until you're too far into course correct. And the way that I can explain that is when you see YouTube clickbait and you see their faces are kind of like shocked and awe, and then it's like Rolex, blah, 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 or Tudor, blah, 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 or the fill in the blank killer watch, right? Whatever it is. Their goal is to get you to click on stuff. And I genuinely wonder if these folks would be more passionate and excited about talking about something as opposed to just a ranking tier list of like the watches I love, the watches I hate, the Hublot rankings of whatever. Like in the end, like who cares? Who cares? What I would rather ask a question about is, and I know you've made these videos for 5 years or whatever, and they get a million views, but like, what's the watch that you wore when you got married? Tell me that story. It was were your parents or your grandfather into watches? Oh, what did they wear? That's what I want to hear. And I think what's really funny is when you meet some of these people in real life, they don't give you the rankings. They don't do all of that stuff that gets a million views. They sit down with you and you have a real conversation about the watch that's on your wrist. And they look at it and they go, "Oh, like explain to me what watch is that? Oh, is that a?" And then you fill in the blank with whatever the story is, and then you get to know real people, and all of that business modeling gets pushed aside, and we get to the conversation that I think we're having here, which is genuine. And so again, I want this show to be a genuine representation of this space, a place where the unusual stories get told at length in the length that they deserve, and where, the watchmaker with 9 people in his workshop gets the same attention as the one with 1,000-person waitlist. Where, I don't have to make something content friendly if it's not, because, the only person I'm accountable to is the listener. And the only currency that I'm trading in is your time and your trust. And so why would I sell that out? And so my goal here is as we go through and we cover this material, if you enjoy it, then you continue to listen. If you feel like I've sold out, then you stop listening. And my goal here is to never sell myself out. And so then ideally I never sell you out. And I think when you're working at this, and I think you can't really honor a listener from behind a paywall. And so no, and I mean it, as long as I can do this for free, I will continue to make these for free. Okay. Segment 3, the listener mail section. Okay, here we go. Okay. So here are here's here's my stuff. Okay, I'm gonna get into this section right now. Okay, letter 1. We're gonna change this name to Marcus. You'll know who you are because you're in Portland. All right, so Wachowski. I'm 34, got into watches 3 years ago. By the time episode 10 dropped, I had 9 watches in a drawer, and I genuinely could not have told you why I own most of them. I sat down after listening with a piece of paper and went through them one by one. 2 of them are hedonic, and I love them. Studio Underdog Watermelon that came after that episode. Yeah, you sold me. I'm not strong. Sorry about that, dude. Sorry about your wallet. And a vintage Casio A158W, 158W. Sweet. I've worn that since college. Awesome. 2 of them are eudaimonic, my grandfather's Bulova Accutron from the 1960s that I had restored, and a Hamilton khaki field I bought on the day of my divorce on the day my divorce was finalized because I wanted to start over and wearing something simple and honest. The other 5 I sold within 2 months of listening. Here's the part I want to share with you. The 5 I sold were all watches that some YouTuber I respected told me I needed, all in caps. A Tudor Black Bay 58, an Oris Aquas, a Hamilton Intramatic, a Longines Spirit, and a Seiko Alpinist. All awesome watches, by the way. They literally, you say that next. Every single one is a great watch. Every single one was on me awesome, but it's a watch that I had no relationship to. Now I'm back down to 4 watches. I wear them all. The Accutron is on my wrist as I write this. I have not been this happy with my collection since I started. The framework worked. I owe you a beer. Thanks for the season, Marcus. Yeah, no beers needed. I don't drink a whole lot. We have a lineage of alcoholics in my family, so so probably root beer for me. But yeah, awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. And I know your name's not Marcus. I know what your real name is, but in Portland, Oregon, thanks, brother. I appreciate that. Okay, so let me give you my kind of humble response to that. So, well, one, thank you for the letter. I just want to say a couple of things. I have some notes here as well. So, first one, you didn't need to sell any of those 5 watches. The people who told you you probably didn't need theirs either, I guess. They're further along kind of in the same pattern. So please don't beat yourself up on the sells. I think that the system I think works. You bought, you wore, you sat down with them, you noticed that they weren't yours and you let them go. That's like a healthy collector. Second, that Accutron, the 1960s, the tuning fork, I'm assuming it's a tuning fork Bulova, that movement, with that, like, hum, I think I'm assuming that yours hums. It makes one of, like, the most beautifully strange pieces of, like, mid-century watchmaking, that's rad. The fact that it was your grandfather's is cool, and the fact that you had it restored rather than just letting it sit in, like, a dead drawer, that's, like, the entire game. So, 1, I would wanna know who restored it for you 'cause I'd love to pick up one of those. And that is like a eudaimonic watch in, like, the deepest sense possible, so congratulations for that, and wear it with pride. 4 watches, like, all worn and all meaningful, that's not a beginner collection, that's like most people in this hobby are trying to get back to, and, like, you're already there, so if you can just stay there, that would be awesome, and again, you don't owe me a beer, just wear that Accutron proudly, and if you do have someone that restores that you know of that can restore those watches, that'd be awesome to share with me too. Okay. Let's move to we have her listed as Sarah in Edinburgh, Scotland. I didn't realize we had listeners in Scotland. Hi, Wachowski. I'm writing because I'm the friend in the Rolex episode. Awesome. The one who wants the Submariner. Here's the context. My dad wore a no date sub for 30 years. He died in 2022. I'm sorry to hear that. I have his watch. It's in a safe deposit box because I'm not ready to wear it yet, but I have it. I want my Submariner. I want my own Submariner. Not to replace his, not because of some prestige reason, because when I wear one, eventually on my wrist, I will feel like I'm carrying forward something that mattered to him. I get that. My boyfriend is a watch guy. Yep, I apologize to you for that. When I told him I was thinking about buying one, his immediate response was, "Have you considered a Tudor Black Bay 58? Same lineage, much better value." That's all in quotations. I love him. He's a good man. He is also by your framework the snob. Bless him. Anyway, I am going to my AD next month to put my name on the list. I just wanted to thank you for giving me the language to explain it to him without it sounding like an accusation that I'm not buying a Rolex because I don't know about Tudor. I'm buying a Rolex because of my dad. He listened to the episode last night I sent to him. He apologized this morning. He's coming to the AD with me. Wow, such a good man. Sarah. Okay. Sarah in Scotland. I should have read that I cannot read that in a Scottish accent. I want to say 2 things to you, and then 1 thing to your boyfriend, which is weird, but whatever. To you, I think your dad would be proud. I've never met him. I've never seen the watch. I know nothing about your family beyond, like, this letter that you wrote, and I'm completely certain that I'm connected to you in a way 'cause I lost both of my a no date sub for like 30 years is the watch of a man who picked one thing and then let it become a part of him. And the fact that you want to carry that forward with your own sub on like your own wrist, it's like exactly the kind of decision that this hobby it exists for. So I would say as much as you're excited, I would say don't rush it. When you're ready to wear his, you'll know. And until then, I think you're in your own right to kind of to start at your own pace. And so to use second, I think the sub that you order from your AD will be a brand new watch, like a new case, new bracelet, new dial, but it's not going to be new for real. It's going to be the next chapter in something that started well before you were born. So wear it knowing that, even though it's a brand new watch, it's a lineage watch. It's another link. And I guess to your boyfriend, well done, mate. The apology the next morning is like the move that separates like a good watch friend from a great watch friend, and it's also the separation of like a good boyfriend to a great boyfriend. I just, I don't know how long you guys have been together, but maybe make an honest woman out of her. Sorry. Did I sound like a parent there for a second? I apologize. So the fact that you're gonna go to the AD with her, I think if that's the move that's gonna make you into a great partner as well as just being supportive. So that's cool. So I guess folks take notes from this boyfriend. And Sarah, thanks for the letter and send me a picture from the boutique. That'd be cool. Okay, let's go to this next one. This one's coming from Canada. This is Daniel from Toronto. Wachowski. I am Canadian. I've lived in London. Okay, so is this coming from Canada or is this coming from it says Canada. I'm Canadian who lived in London for 10 years, came back to okay, there we go. I got to read the whole. I came back to Toronto in 2019 with 2 suitcases and 3 watches. One of those watches is a Smith's Everest that I bought at Time Factors. Your episode 18 made me dig into Smith's more and dig it out of the drawer where it's been living since 2022. I put it on this morning and I'm wearing it as I type this. And I just want to say 2 things. One, I'd completely forgotten how light this watch is. The proportions on a Smith's are perfect for a small-ish watch. I stopped wearing it because I was buying better watches, and I forgot that, and this is going to use quotes, that better is not actually what watches are for. Two, I cried a little when you said that the Smith's was the watch you wore when your son was born. I have a son. He's 6. Mine just turned 7. I have not held him as much as I want to in the last 6 months because I'm working too much. I'm gonna fix that today. The Smiths reminded me of that. Thanks for the season. The show is doing real things in real lives. Don't underestimate that. Daniel. Okay, Daniel in Toronto. Toronto and by way, I guess, of Toronto by way of London back to Canada. I'm not gonna say much. I think your letter kinda says everything. You wear the Smiths and hold your son. Those moments with kids, especially at that age when they're small and loving and kind, and the whole world is open to them, I think sometimes people throw those away when they're stuck on their phones, and so we have a rule kind of in our house that if you're outside and you're playing with the kids or it's time for Legos or whatever it is, that the phones get put away. And we do that at dinner, we do that all the time, so those moments you don't get those back, and I think if you spend your time working and trying to support. I know that a lot of us have to do that to put food on the table. But when we get those moments with our kids, we should be present. And I think no better way of knowing that is to put the phone away and not have those connections. And if you want to have a connection, then you have your watch that's telling you the time, and that's all it tells you. So again, wear the Smiths, hold your son, and the watch is going to remind us to do things that we've always known that we should have been doing, but we stopped doing. That's the entire purpose. Like it's the whole idea of what I say at the end, which is wear something good, and it's always meant that. Your son is 6. Again, mine is a little bit older. He just turned 7. But I remember him at 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and then those are the ages that, like, every single thing that you do with him is being filled in his memory, whether you know it or not, and he will not remember most of this consciously, but he's gonna remember all of it in his body, and you wrote me a letter today, so go, close the laptop, wear the Smiths, go find him, just know I'm proud of you, and I think the watches are doing their job, so that's pretty kind. Okay, let's see where we are now. This is from I hope that answered your question, by the way, or response to your letter. Okay. Next one, we're gonna go to this one's coming. Where did it go? Okay, this is it looks like Aisha, Aisha from Lagos, Nigeria. That's interesting. I don't have on my data, it doesn't you must be behind like a VPN or something. Good for you for hiding your specific location and lying to all of that software that tries to track your location. Hello, Riste. I want to write to you because I think you may not realize how far your show reaches. I'm 28. I live in Lagos. I'm a software engineer. I work for a fintech company and started listening to your podcast when a colleague of mine who lives in London sent me episode 1 and said, "You will like this man." He was right. I do not own a mechanical watch. I have an Apple Watch and a Casio Quartz. I cannot afford the watches you talk about and may never be able to afford them. I want to be clear about that. This is not a sob story, this is just my context. But I want to tell you what this is. The show is not about watches for me. It's about how someone can love a thing so much. I love software the way you love watches. The episode about Dornbluth, the workshop with the 9 people and the breakfast meeting and the man who makes the handmade boxes. I listened to that episode 4 times. That's good. You probably gave me all of those clicks. Thanks for that. Not because I wanted to buy a Dornbluth, because the shop is what I want my engineering team to feel like one day when I have my own company. The episode about Chopek, the part where the 6-year-old emailed them, that's my kid, by the way, and they wrote back. I sent that episode to my mother. She does not know anything about watches, and she loved it. Thank you for making something that travels this far. The people in Lagos are listening. There are people in other places that go further than Lagos is listening as well. We may never buy any of the watches, but we are here. Aisha, that is a crazy story. Man, I don't even know how to respond to that. I guess here's the first thing I want to say. I guess you belong here. I didn't realize that we had listeners that were not in the watch space. I will say that you belong in the hobby 100%. the hobby of watches, I guess, has nothing to do with whether you own a mechanical watch. The hobby is kind of the love of a thing or the love of a craft or intention. And I guess it's the work that we do because it matters to the person doing it. I guess you said it yourself, right? You love software, I guess, the way that I love watches. And I guess that's the same love, but it's a different object, but the relationship, I guess, is the same. And the fact that you listened to the Dorn Bluth episode like 4 times and what you took from it is that that's what you want your engineering team to feel like one day is that's awesome. And I think it's the most important sentence that like anyone's written to me. The Dornbluth workshop, it's really not about watches, not it's I think it's really more about the way that people work, like 9 people, dining table, morning meetings, take care of the boxes. It's like a value system, and I think that's portable. It can be applied to software companies. It could probably be applied to restaurants. It can be applied to like a group of people when they decide to do something together well. So when you build your company, and I'm saying when, not if, but when you build it, because you wrote me this letter, maybe remember the breakfast. Remember those details of the specifics about how Dornbluth makes their watches, and maybe the breakfast is the company. The breakfast is the value that makes it visible when you start to work with your team. Maybe that'll be your morning huddles will be over breaking bread. And I guess tell your mom, thanks for listening to the Chopek episode with the 6-year-old. That's my kid who's now 7. I'll tell my kiddo that a mom in Lagos heard his story about the diver sketch, and the kid, my kid's gonna lose his mind probably. So I guess you're welcome, but also I think I'm more thankful than I am saying you're welcome. I guess you're the kind of person that I didn't even realize this show was for, and so I guess send the next letter whenever you want. I guess we're listening, so that's pretty rad. I've got a couple of other ones here, but I'm gonna stop there because I don't know if I can beat that letter. So goodness gracious, that one kind of pulled at my heartstrings. Okay, so I guess thank you for an awesome season. Thank you for being kind and compassionate and listening to all of this stuff, and thanks for just being here for the entire journey. I'm excited to see you all in season 2. So that's been what's on your Riste. Welcome to kind of the end of this episode, but then also the beginning of what's going to be hopefully season 2. Have a great summer or winter or fall. I guess whenever you're listening to this thing. All right, see you later. Wear something good.
Hey, what's I ski? Yeah. What's on your wrist? Perpetual calendar, 3-hander, stainless steel on my skin. I want a daily driver, not a shrine I can't fit in. Casio on Monday morning, Zella's got me saying stop. Topper Friday in the group chat, and my budget just got dropped. I can't afford that, still I stare at it. 80 can suck it. I'm in love with a habit. Lauren's group chat gonna make me broke. One more strap swap, and I swear it's all a joke. What's on your wrist? What's on your wristy? Daily driver, baby. What's on your wrist? What's on your wrist? I just can't resist. Watch out. Popped out crown on the wrist. Third swap of the day, yeah, I know. Brown on leather, steel on steel, then I change it for the show. Got it on my wish list, but I'm not acting rich. Reddit bros gonna fry us if I call this one a grail and switch. I can't afford that, still I stare at it. 80 can suck it, I didn't mean that. I'm in love with a habit. Shout back in the comments got me losing sleep, but I laugh it off cause we don't take it too deep. What's on your wrist? What's on your wristy? Daily driver, baby. What's on your wrist? What's on your wrist? I just can't resist. Watch out on the crap wrist. Perpetual calendar, 3-hander and a dream. Stainless steel, a scratch or two. Still the king of the scene. Zella's new drop. Stop. I click and then I flinch. Then I post, just browsing, and I buy it in a pinch. What's on your wrist? What's on your wrist? Daily driver, baby. What's on your wrist? What's on your wrist? I just can't resist. Watch out on the crap wrist. What's on your wrist? What's on your wrist? What's on your wrist? What's on your wrist? too seriously.